Hey, let me ask you this quick question. How many of you have ever had a bad job in your life? Raise your hand. Anybody had a bad job? Oh, man. Yeah, there's a bunch of us. I've had a couple of jobs where they stick in your brain, right? It's so bad that it's sort of nightmarish. You know, you're in this job. And I think one of the things that's interesting about a bad job, if you've ever had one, and I think most of us have experienced at some level, sort of a bad job. I think one of the things that used to play through my mind, especially when I was younger in some of the jobs that I had, is this is a complete waste of my talent. You ever felt that? You ever been in a job where you look at what you're doing and you go, well, this is a complete waste of everything I am. It's nothing that I'm good at. This is a waste of my talent. And the reality is, I think that anytime you see somebody waste talent, anytime you feel like you're in that specific situation where your talent isn't being used, it's frustrating, right? Because you think, I'm better than this. I can do more than this. Well, I was thinking about this when it comes to God's kingdom, this idea of talent. You know, I've been doing ministry for quite a while, like off and on for 20 years. I've worked in the marketplace for some seasons and then worked as a youth pastor and executive pastor. But I could tell you that there's nothing worse than being around people when it comes to God's kingdom who you know they have so much more to give, and yet you see them wasting their God-given talent. There's nothing worse. See, here's what I know, Heartland, is that we were placed on this planet for a purpose. I say it every time I'm here. You're not an accident. You were placed on this planet on purpose, and you were placed on this planet for a purpose. Now listen, that means that every single one of us have a God-given talent to help advance his kingdom, and yet so often I've seen firsthand people who are wasting that talent. I know firsthand what it looks like to waste that talent. And this morning, we're going to talk about what it looks like to use your talent to advance this kingdom. Now, I'm going to be straight with you for a minute, okay? I'm going to get straight and real. I never do this, but last week you had a guest speaker named Steve Carter. How many of you enjoyed Steve? He was awesome, wasn't he? Wasn't he awesome? Now, I don't know Steve, and this week I texted just out of the blue. I'm like, hey, would you send me Steve's link? Because I'm going to watch his message. I watched his message, and I got to tell you, I was horrified. You want to know why? Because he stole my message. This never happens, guys. I've been praying for this message for 4 weeks. I mean, I know sometimes you think like maybe the pastor, they sort of speak hyperbole, and that's not true. When I'm thinking about what I'm going to speak to you, this is my home, you are my people, I pray about what this is. And I felt like God say, no, this week before Christmas, this is what I want you to do. And so I saw Steve's message, and I watched it, and I walked into my buddy's office right after. I went, dude, what am I going to do? I just watched Steve give my message, and there's no way I can be better than him. And he goes, you know, Eric, you know in Hebrew, there's no word for very. I went, wait, say that again? Well, he goes, you know, like when in Hebrew, if you want to make a point, well, in English, we'll say, I'm very hungry, right? Or it was very good. Or I might say to my children, this is very important. He said they don't have that word in Hebrew. So in Hebrew, when someone wants to make a point, they'll say the word twice or maybe 3 times. So if it's important, you'll say, it's important. And so here's what I'm trusting. I'm entrusting that 2 men that don't know each other who pray for this place and came to speak to you, God put on our hearts something that was very similar because he wanted a 2-part series to talk to you about something that was really, really important. Cool? So we're going to talk about this invitational life part 2. We're going to pick up on what Steve talked about today. And we're going to talk about, okay, how do I get in this game? Because here's the truth. You got a role to play. Let's pray real quick. God, speak through me. Give me clarity. Help me say what it is that you would have me say. And help everyone here hear it. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, before I came to Heartland, man, this was a long time ago. You know, I was here from about 2003 for 10 years, till like 2012. So before that, I have an accounting degree. I'm an accountant by trade. And I did youth ministry. And out of youth ministry, Chrissy and I moved to Denver, Colorado. I took a job in oil and gas. I was a oil and gas accountant. That's what I did, and moved into being an energy trader. Now, I had been around ministry my whole life. My father was a pastor. I grew up in a church, right? Like, I fell asleep under pews, right? That was my life growing up. So I knew the idea of like what it meant to see kingdom work and do kingdom work, but I never faced the reality that oftentimes when you go out into the marketplace, you begin to ask yourself the question like, well, what does it look like to do kingdom work when I don't work at a church? I had never really faced this before. So we went to Colorado. This was, 99, and I took a job in oil and gas. And I remember telling Chrissy, is this how the rest of the world lives when it comes to the kingdom? Because I don't know what I'm supposed to do when it comes to advancing his kingdom. And I remember specifically that two things began to filter through my young brain about what kingdom work is and what it isn't. And it's interesting because I think as I began to talk to people, most of us who don't work in churches, these ideas are actually quite prevalent among us. I think the wrong ideas about kingdom and our role in it, but I remember specifically having two thoughts about what kingdom work was, and this was the first one. I remember thinking, well, maybe there are some talents, like that I have, being an accountant, that just aren't kingdom talents, right? Maybe there's some things that I'm good at. Maybe there are talents in this world that just aren't kingdom talents. And I think it goes something like this, that there are talents that are kingdom talents. You know, it's like Gabe. He's the guy who leads worship right over here. His talent's kingdom talent because he can get up here, play the guitar, sing real pretty. It's really nice. Or we look at a preacher and we go, oh, that's a kingdom talent because he can get up here and he can speak. And maybe there are a few things that are kingdom talents, but there's a bunch of talents that aren't kingdom talents. And so I think the temptation is what we do is we go try to learn a kingdom talent. Or like, maybe I should pick up a guitar. Maybe I should sing. We hear you sing and you shouldn't. Right? We go, maybe I should learn a kingdom talent because I want in on that game. I want in on kingdom game. I want in on that. And there's a second thought that I remember thinking, well, maybe there are talents that just aren't kingdom talents, and maybe the only things that count are the stuff you do at church, right? There's this idea that's prevalent among so many of us that the only things that really count is the stuff we do here at church for 1 hour a week, once a week. And let me say this. I absolutely fundamentally believe in the mission of the church, like us getting together. This is important. It is important. It's important that we come together, that we worship together. And we need folks. All of you should be stepping into serving opportunities. There's all kinds of ways to do that. You should use your time and your talent and your treasure. But it was interesting. I was thinking about this message, and I was hanging out with a buddy of mine who's a plumber, right? He's an awesome dude. He came over to my house to help me fix something. And we were sitting around sort of chatting about just like his life. And I said, hey, Darren, let me ask you a question. How many plumbers do you think go to our church? And he goes, oh, dude, I don't know, 24. I'm like, there's 24 plumbers. Okay. How much work do you think we have at our church that would put those plumbers to work here at the church? He goes, well, not very much. I mean, we have some campuses, but the truth is, like, we don't have enough work for those talents to use, for those plumbers to use their talents here at the church. And I got to thinking, see, for him, if his talent isn't a kingdom talent and he can't come do it at the church, I wonder if he leaves my house or if he leaves the church and go, well, I guess none of my stuff count. You know what it does? If that's the way we see the game, the kingdom game, you know what it creates? I brought this visual aid to help us see how too many of us approach church. These are bleachers. You're familiar with bleachers. You've sat in them. Bleachers are what you do where you sit when you're watching a game, right? Like if we really begin to believe, or if we believe that there are only sort of certain talents that count for kingdom work, and if we believe the only stuff that counts is the stuff on Sunday, you know what begins to happen? We begin to treat our faith like a spectator sport. That our job, your job, is to come and sit in the stands. Listen to the preacher preach. Hope it's going to be decent. Hope the music's good. Wasn't very good today. That guy's an idiot, right? This is what we do. We sit in the stands and we see the game happening. We watch it going on, but we begin to believe, I guess my job is to show up and sit and watch. And we do this for 1 hour a week because my talents don't count. And the only stuff that counts is at the church. And here's the problem. If that's the way we see church, we're missing the on-purpose life. See, this is what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 28, verse 18. Listen to what Jesus says to us. He says, then Jesus came to them and he said this, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. What Jesus is saying is, listen, I have authority. What I'm about to tell you, you need to write this down. I have authority. Jesus goes on and says, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Teach them to obey everything I've commanded you, and surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. Listen, you notice what Jesus said? He says, listen, I have authority. I want you to go. Now, Jesus doesn't make any caveats, does he? He does not say, well, those of you with special skills should go. Those of you with kingdom talents should go. Jesus is looking at all of us and say we're followers of his, and he says all of you need to go. This is not a spectator sport. And something happened along the way. It was actually at a sporting event where I ran into a hot dog salesman that changed my perspective of bleachers. Now, all of you have been to some sort of sporting event, right? Now, when we go to, when you go watch the Bears, you're not sitting in bleachers like this. If you go see Green Bay, you're not sitting in bleachers like this. But I was at a football game. I was up in section 504, like row 12, seat 2, watching my beloved Denver Broncos. And there was a fella that had been working our section selling hot dogs. You've seen those guys, right? Like they're bringing it. I mean, they're bringing it. This fella was in it, selling hot dogs, and he was after it selling hot dogs. And I remember he caught my attention because of the passion that he had in his section. He worked our section, right? He's up and down those stairs. And at one point he came by, this is probably third quarter, and I'm hungry. I want a hot dog. I'm like, hey, buddy, I'll get a hot dog. He gets a hot dog. He passes it down. I'm just making small talk with him because I'm right there on the edge. And I go, dude, do you ever hear the game down there and sort of feel like you're missing the game because you're up here working our section selling hot dogs? Is it ever kind of a bummer? And he was like, brother, that ain't my game. Selling hot dogs is my game. He goes, so I work your section. I don't know what the Broncos are doing because that's never been my game. I'm the hot dog man, right? And it clicked to me. I went, wait a minute. That's what faith is. See, the reality is, it's not a spectator sport. We weren't meant to come sit in the bleachers and watch. And I'm going to ask you for a second to be mentally pliable, because I'm going to take these bleachers and I want to flip it on its head and say, maybe we're not supposed to be Eric in row 12, seat 2. Maybe all of us are supposed to be hot dog salesmen. Maybe the reality is that the talent that you have has given you access to a space that only you can work. Go with me with this. Go with me. You've been to the football game. You've gotten a ticket, right? And on that ticket, it's printed 3 things: a section, a row, and a seat, right? And that ticket, when you go to the Bears game or Green Bay or the Broncos or wherever you're going, that means that's your section, right? So you have this ticket. Now, if you have this ticket and you're in section 504, you can't go down to section 122, right? And if you're in section 122, which is actually a really nice section, you can't come up to my nosebleed section either. You can't come up here. This is my section. That's yours. That's how a ticket works, right? It gives you access to a space. Well, I got to thinking about our talents, like how we're wired. And I wondered, maybe if we flip this whole thing around, maybe the thing that you're good at, this skill that you have, that you've discounted and said, well, it's not a kingdom talent, and maybe it doesn't count because I can't do it here on Sunday. Maybe your talent is all about access. Think about it. When I was in my mid-20s, because I had the skill of accounting, God opened a door for me to join an energy trading group where there were 400 people, of which most of them didn't know Jesus. I learned this pretty quickly, that most of them didn't go to church, most of them didn't have active faith. God opened a door for me that no pastor could ever get to. See, Gabe, our worship leader, couldn't get to Transmontane and speak to these people, right? This pastor, nobody could get to them. I had access to them. This was my section, my row, my seat. And maybe for all of us, if we begin to realize, listen, you have access. Your talent is a kingdom talent because it gives you access to a bunch of people who don't know God. So like if you're a waitress and you're working at Applebee's, that skill set opens the door to a bunch of people who don't know Jesus. If you're an accountant and you're working at Sunstrand or wherever, it opens the door. Whatever your job is. Even if you're, I know if you're a stay-at-home mom. Stay-at-home moms should have access to a bunch of sections, right? Because if you're a stay-at-home mom, you're like a physician, right? And you're a CEO, and you're picking up after kids. I mean, you get access to a bunch of sections. Stay-at-home moms, can we give it up for the stay-at-home moms? We love moms in this place. Listen, whatever it is, student, accountant, doctor, your talent has given you access. And what if that's all talent's supposed to do? Is give you access to people. Now listen, I'm going to give you a practical acronym that helps us work through this. Think about yourselves as a hot dog salesman. That's what you do. You have a section. The accountant's in section 504. You have access to them. I'm going to give you 4 letters that if you do these 4 letters, you can take your talent that's given you access to some people and you can put it to kingdom work. And here's what I'm telling you. There is nothing cooler on planet Earth than to use that skill to walk into that section and to tell somebody about God and watch their lives be flipped upside down. It's super awesome. It's so good. So I'm going to give you 4 letters that every single one of you could put to work. CLRG. CLRG. If you do CLRG, you're going to get in on this. Now listen, I believe this with all my heart. There is no reason that God would ask me to talk about this after Steve spoke last week unless God has somebody that needs to be reached this week. I know some of you are like, oh boy, this fella's super dramatic. I'm not joking. I wonder if there's somebody in your space who's hanging by a thread and God taps some kid, no, I'm not a kid anymore, I pretend to be, some guy in Colorado and said, Eric, I need you to say this one more time. There's a life that's hanging in the balance. CLRG. How do you use your talent? Number one, we'll call it connect. C, connect. I bet you right now you could think of 3 people in your section who don't know Jesus. I bet right now you could think of at least 1 who don't know Jesus in your space. Somebody that's in your section of life, sitting on your row, that you know they probably don't have a faith. There's stuff going on in their life. I bet if you got real serious right now, you could write down 3 names. This is what connect intentionally means. Listen, stop wandering into your workspace and pretending like you're not supposed to bring God's word in there. Now, I'm not asking you to start preaching tomorrow on top of your desk. That might get you thrown out of the section. But I am saying that it doesn't do us any good if we walk into our workspace and we're not first intentional. You know what I did when I was at Transmontane when this clicked in my brain? I wrote down 3 names. I still know the 3 names. This was like 15 years ago. Christian, Bob, Chuck. 3 guys that I was pretty sure didn't know Jesus. That's all being intentional is. In your brain, identifying people that you want to build a relationship with. Now listen, you have to build a relationship with them. Some of you're already super excited. Your heart's racing. You're going to go in tomorrow and you're going to plop down at their desk and ask them too many questions way too fast. You need to calm down. Start with coffee. How you doing? Can I get to know you? But intentional means be intentional. This is your section. You're a hot dog salesman. This is your game. But you got to get in there and know, are there 3 people in my space that I'm going to intentionally begin to think about, to pray about, to build relationship with? That's C, connect. Just intentionally connect. Connect, C. You can remember C, right? C, L. This one's really important. I call it looking. Too many of us don't expect God to be doing much in the space we work in. We just don't. We expect God to show up at church because this is God's house. So we're like, well, yeah, he's going to show up here. But I'm betting if you're anything like me, when I walked into Transmontane, I really didn't think much about God being at work there, right? I'm not really looking for him doing anything there because I'm there to do my job. My talent has got me into this space. It gets me a paycheck. I should do my job. But listen, it's pretty clear that God is working all the time, everywhere. And you might be surprised if you start looking for him, what you'll see. Jesus says this in John 5:17, my Father is always working. He's always working. God's always at work. I remember years ago, you guys probably remember this, John Ortberg in one of his messages talked about this similar concept. How do you begin to get better at looking for God? And he used the analogy of Where's Waldo? You remember that? Well, if you don't, let me refresh your memory. You ever seen one of those Where's Waldo's book? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Where's Waldo? Yeah, those things drive you crazy. I was so frustrated with those things because Harry, when he was little, we had a bunch of those Where's Waldo's book, and he would spend so much time thumbing through Where's Waldo. Now, if you don't know what a Where's Waldo book is, it's these books of drawings of people in these random spaces, right? And there's one little Waldo hidden in there, and you got to find him. And it's maddening, right? Because I can't find him. And Harry would come in and go, oh, there he is, Dad. And he flips out, oh, there he is, Dad. It made me feel like an idiot. I couldn't find him. Well, John said that you notice why a kid is able, who's stared at Waldo books, why he's able so quickly to identify him is because our brains, when you get practice at seeing something, get better at seeing it. See, seeing God at work is as much about looking as it is anything else. And the more we look for him to be at work in our work, the more we'll see him at work in our work. But we have to be looking. Just looking. What would it look like if we were expectant? when we walked into our workspace. Lamentations 3:25 says it this way: the Lord is good to those who wait hopefully and expectantly for him. Listen, you can be a part of kingdom. Connect intentionally. Name three people. Name three people. Number two, start looking for God to be at work. That's L. That goes to step number three. Be ready. Ready. Be ready. Listen, readying yourself is a whole lot harder to do than you think. Because here's the truth. You could have three people and you could be looking for God at work. But I'm telling you that when God taps you on the shoulder, and some of us are not prone to stepping out and taking a risk, man, it can be real easy to make excuses why I'm just not going to do that. No. See, readying yourself is really important. And all that means is it's sort of like predetermining that when God taps you on the shoulder and it's your time to reach out to one of your three, you're going to do it. You're going to take the risk. You're going to make the ask. You're going to step into that space. And it takes faith. Look, when you build a relationship with someone, and this is why it really is challenging. I actually think sometimes it's easier to talk about God to people we don't know than people we really know, right? Because we don't want to blow up the relationship, and we don't want to think we're a bunch of weirdos. I'm telling you, readying yourself. That's just like every day. Imagine as you're driving to work, commuting to work, if you said, God, I'm praying for my three people. I'm going to be looking for you to be at work. And God, today, if you tap me on the shoulder, I'm going to go. If you tap me on the shoulder, I'm ready. I'm going to take the risk today, God. You know, if it makes you nervous to share your faith, to say what needs to be said, listen, you're in good company. Makes me nervous too. It's easier for me to stand up here and preach to a bunch of you than sit across from one person. This is not easy. The Apostle Paul says it this way in Ephesians 6:19. He said, don't forget to pray for me. Pray that I know what to say and have the courage to say it, right? I have the courage to say it. C, have three people. L, be looking for God. R, be ready. And then this is the last one. When it's time, it's G, you gotta go. Now listen, I worked for 4 years as an energy, I started as an accountant, then I was an energy trader. And my three guys, I prayed for regularly for probably, 12 to 18 months. I'd pray for them. I'd ask them out to lunch. And there was one guy in particular, Christian, who was pretty close to my age at that point. Now, he was a guy who, honestly, you've seen these guys. Like, he seemed to have everything going for him, right? He made a ton of money. He drove awesome cars. He had, supermodel girlfriends. He was dressed to the nines. He had an amazing, amazing hair. He was awesome. He had everything together. And so I remember thinking all the time, God, how am I ever I don't know what to say. How's that ever gonna work? I don't really know. I just kept sort of preparing myself, going, all right. But when you open the door, probably 18 months in, it was one afternoon. It was like 5 o'clock, it was the end of the day. And I was standing up, I remember this. I worked downtown Denver at this big building, and we had this open concept floor. I was up at the marker dry erase board. I was writing some numbers, end of the day market numbers on the board. And I look over and I see Christian sitting on the side of the table. And at this point, we have a pretty cool relationship. And I knew something wasn't right. Right? And my heart started racing because I knew it was time to go. I remember turning to the board and going, okay. I walk up and I'm like, dude, you doing all right? Over the next 4 hours, standing at the corner of a desk, Christian began to pour out his heart. This broken young guy who looked like he had everything just spilled it all, how life didn't seem to have meaning and he had no purpose and he didn't know what he was doing. And he feels like he was floundering. And I just sat there and listened. For 4 hours, they turned the lights out. They finally kicked us out. And we're walking outside and he looked at me and I remember specifically, he's like, Eric, I don't know what life means. What is it supposed to mean? Now listen. I've been doing this for a bit. I grew up in church. You would think I would know what to say at that point. It's funny what happens when you get in these moments, right? Because now it's go time. He's asking the most fundamental existential question. This is where, Eric, you go, dude, it's Jesus, right? This is where I bring my evangelist. I didn't know what to say, and there was a Barnes & Noble like right there on the corner. I was like, I don't know, let's go in here. We went to the Christian section. I grabbed a Max Lucado book, and I went, here, you should probably just read this. He took the book, we went to dinner, no joke. We left, and then I felt like a total idiot. I was like, oh, great, God. I've been praying forever, and you finally give me a shot, and I give him a Max Lucado book. You're such an idiot, that's how I felt. I went to bed, I came back the next morning. I had to be in early, I'm sitting at my desk, and Christian comes into the office and he's wearing the same outfit. He looked awful. Shirt unbuttoned, hair disheveled. He comes up to my desk. He's like, Eric, I got to talk to you right now. And I was like, oh, great. I screwed up his whole life. He went drinking last night. He looked like a hot mess. He's like, we got to go in the hallway. We went in the hallway. He's like, he pulled the book out. He goes, I stayed up all night. I read this whole book. I don't even know what all of it means, but I need some of that. I was like, yeah, you need Jesus, man. He's like, I need that. And right there in the hallway, I'm like, dude, you can have Jesus like right now. I prayed for Christian to know Jesus. That young guy came to Jesus. I got in on kingdom work. My talent was a kingdom talent. You want to know why? Because there is no pastor, there was no worship leader who could get to Christian. God knew I could. And so he put me in a space. Listen, you can do this. You can. There are people who all the time hear a message like this and take a step. They get intentional. They start connecting with people. They start looking for God to be at work, right? They begin to ready themselves, and when God says go, they go. And they start to impact the world in ways that a guy like me can't. You can do things that I can never do because you have access to a space that I don't. I was talking to a friend of mine just recently, and he was telling me how, he's like, I'm not a pastor, but I've just sort of tried to step out and use my access to begin to make a kingdom difference. And as we talked, I went, dude, would you mind like just recording this so that I could play it for some of my friends to encourage them? And so would you just check out, this is Anthony's story.
So I moved to Denver 5 years ago for a job as assistant coach for the Broncos. November of 2015, I came to Christ, and my life's never been the same. Went to college for kinesiology. I started being a strength coach right after college. Worked for Jacksonville Jaguars for 3 years, and then moved here with the Broncos. So my job really is doing everything from a mental, physical standpoint, getting the guys ready to play on Sunday. When I came to Christ, it was November of 2015. That was an amazing season, not only for my faith, but for my career and for the Denver Broncos. It was the year we won the Super Bowl. You know, I was extremely grateful to have that blessing and to have that opportunity, and that it turned out the way it did. But I was left with a, you know, once you go and as a coach, that's the pinnacle. It's winning the Super Bowl, right? And I was left with a little bit of like, what next? And I'm like, this surely can't be my purpose, is just win a Super Bowl. But I said, there's gotta be, I can make a bigger impact with what I've been blessed with. And so I talked to another strength coach at another university, a good friend who's another Christ follower, and we just decided to start a strength conditioning organization that was faith-based. It's called Strength Coach Outreach, and we put on a conference in June of 2016. There were doubts. I was, what if 5 people come? What if 50 people come? And then now, holy cow, what am I gonna do, right? It's just me and my buddy. Whatever our profession, right? Whatever environment we are in, right? In our work life, in our personal life, there's your first start and who's on your row. You share similar beliefs, you share a similar skill, you share a similar trade. So looking to your left and right, for me, it was other strength coaches. So if there's ever doubts, it's stop and saying, hey, my intent here is to care for that other person and share with them all the things that I was blessed with, and who that person was in my life that brought me to Christ, they had the same intentions for me. And if they didn't step up for me, I may not be sitting here talking to you.
His story's cool because he's so humble, but through this strength coach network and his access, he's led multiple dozens of pro athletes to Jesus, people that I would never have access to. But see, he began to understand. He's like, look, I have this section, I have this row, you heard him say it, that these people, where if I can take my talent and then just begin to be intentional, connect, be looking for God, be ready and go, he's gonna use me for kingdom gain. And you know what? This is what I fear, far too many of us. We just kind of believe that maybe our talents or maybe my personality, I'm just not cut out for that. And so we'll say things like, well, I'm gonna pray and I'm gonna read my Bible and I'm gonna serve and I'm gonna give. But as far as like talking about Jesus and being a pastor and doing that stuff, I'm gonna leave that to the professionals. I'm gonna leave that to the pros. No, listen. Your game, the game. This idea of kingdom, it's not a spectator sport. This isn't for you to come and watch us professionals do the work. It's for us to go into our sections and spread the good news of Jesus together. This is what we're supposed to do. This is what you're called to do. And Anthony said it, and I believe it. That maybe there's somebody in your section, on your road this week, that needs you to step up. Maybe their life's hanging by a thread. Listen, you can do this. Because this is what I know. When we step into this calling, when we step towards someone in our section, when we look for God to be at work in that row and we ready ourselves and then we go, we never do it alone. You want to feel God's wind at your back? Step out and do work on his behalf because he joins you there. Like when you step out, he joins you there. Listen, Heartland. My job, your job is just to say, wherever I am right now, whatever talent I have that's opened this door for me, I'm gonna connect, I'm gonna look, I'm gonna be ready, and I'm gonna go. Now put those up on the screen real quick. Like if you saw that on a license plate, what would that say to you? Do you think it says clergy? I know, don't encourage me. See, you're clergy. That's what you are. That's what we are. We're ambassadors of Jesus. Matthew 28 says, we're to go. I want you to go. I want you to go this week. This is an awesome opportunity. Do you know this is the season when people are so open to what God might do in their lives and the idea of Christmas? What would it look like if maybe you grabbed a few of those cards on your way out? And maybe your go is inviting people. Let me pray for you. God, give us courage to step into kingdom work that you've called us to do, all of us. Give us eyes to be intentional. God, help us look and see you at work. God, help us be ready and give us the courage to go. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.